What if every time you stood up for yourself, you didn't feel guilty afterward? Imagine saying exactly what you feel without over-apologizing or worrying about being too much. Sounds impossible, right? But here's the truth. The problem isn't you. It's how we've been taught to think about boundaries. You don't need to be rude or selfish to stand your ground. Curious to find out how you can start standing up for yourself guilt-free? Standing up for yourself isn't easy. It can feel like walking a tightrope. You don't want to fall into the pit of being too harsh, but you don't want to stay silent either. So, why do we feel guilty when we assert our needs or speak up for ourselves? It's partly because society has conditioned us to believe that standing up for ourselves is inherently selfish. From a young age, many of us are taught to put others first, to be polite, and to avoid conflict at all costs. This idea that pleasing others is a form of virtue creates a powerful internal message that prioritizing your own needs makes you difficult or self-centered. Additionally, feelings of guilt often stem from the fear of rejection. When you stand up for yourself, there's always the risk that others might not like it. Whether it's a family member, a friend, or a colleague, standing firm can sometimes cause tension in your relationships. We fear that asserting ourselves will lead to alienation, and that's where the guilt starts creeping in. But here's the thing, these feelings of guilt don't have to control you. In fact, they can be challenged and replaced with healthier ways of thinking. Another reason we feel guilty is because we fear being labeled as confrontational or unpleasant. The idea of being difficult is something most of us want to avoid. However, what often gets overlooked is that being assertive isn't about confrontation. It's about communication. It's about expressing what you need in a clear and respectful way. And the more we accept this, the less we'll feel guilty about asserting ourselves. Let's break a huge myth. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you a bad person. Boundaries are essential for healthy relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues. Without them, we're more likely to burn out, feel overwhelmed, or even resent others. The key to standing up for yourself is recognizing that you're allowed to have boundaries, and those boundaries don't make you rude, selfish, or unkind. When you don't set boundaries, you're effectively allowing others to dictate your needs and desires. This leads to feeling like a doormat, always giving in and never prioritizing yourself. Over time, this can result in frustration and resentment, often towards the people we care about the most. By not standing up for ourselves, we end up ignoring our own well-being, and that's where guilt and anger begin to fester. Because respecting yourself is just as important as respecting others. It's a way of communicating your worth, and it actually builds healthier, more respectful relationships. When you set clear boundaries, people can understand and appreciate your limits. They can even support your decisions. It's also essential to understand that boundaries help others as much as they help you. Imagine constantly stepping into someone else's space without permission. It could become frustrating for them too. Setting boundaries creates a respectful environment where both parties can thrive. Now that we understand why we feel guilty and why boundaries are crucial, let's talk about practical strategies to help you assert yourself confidently without the overwhelming guilt. The first step to standing up for yourself without guilt is recognizing your self-worth. Understand that your needs and feelings are just as important as anyone else's. When you truly value yourself, you won't feel the need to apologize for wanting something that's reasonable or just. Start by affirming your worth through positive self-talk and remind yourself, my needs matter. Sometimes it's not enough to just think that your needs matter. You have to actively remind yourself of it. Consider writing down things you appreciate about yourself, or recall past situations where you successfully asserted yourself. This can help you internalize the idea that you're worthy of standing up for without guilt. It's also helpful to take stock of the moments when you did feel guilty. Look at them from a distance and ask yourself, was I really being unreasonable? Often we realize that our guilt was disproportionate to the situation. Recognizing this pattern helps you counteract the guilt next time you need to stand up for yourself. The word no can feel incredibly powerful, yet terrifying. Saying no is one of the most important boundary-setting tools, but it's also one of the hardest for many people to master. The key is to practice saying no in low-stakes situations so that it becomes easier when the stakes are higher. It could be as simple as saying no to a request you don't feel comfortable with. You don't need to justify yourself or offer an explanation every time. You can simply say, "No, I can't do that right now," or "I'm not able to help with that, but Thank you for thinking of me. Start small with saying no in situations where there's little to lose, like declining an extra task at work or saying no to a social event you're not interested in. The more you practice, the less guilt you'll feel because you'll realize that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're respecting your own needs. When you start feeling guilty for standing up for yourself, stop and ask yourself, why do I feel guilty? Often the guilt arises from the thought that you're doing something wrong. But, as we discussed, asserting your boundaries is a healthy and necessary practice. Reframing your guilt involves recognizing that it's not guilt that you're feeling, but discomfort. Discomfort is a normal part of change. It's your mind and body adjusting to a new, healthier behavior. A helpful technique here is to remind yourself that guilt is often based on unrealistic expectations. You don't have to please everyone, and you don't need to feel responsible for other people's reactions. What matters is that you are respecting yourself and protecting your energy. Try to see guilt as a temporary feeling that will pass as you adjust to setting boundaries. Over time, your discomfort will fade, and you'll realize that standing up for yourself is just a natural part of maintaining a balanced life. Instead of placing blame or using language that can sound accusatory, try using I statements to express your feelings and needs. For example, instead of saying, "You're always asking too much of me," try saying, "I feel overwhelmed when I'm asked to take on too much." This way, you're not attacking the other person, but instead taking responsibility for your own feelings. It makes it easier for others to hear you without getting defensive. It also shows that you're communicating openly and respectfully without aggression. Using I statements allows the conversation to stay calm and productive. It encourages dialogue rather than creating a conflict, which reduces the potential for guilt afterward. When you assert yourself, resist the urge to over-explain or apologize excessively. Apologizing too much can undermine your position and make it sound like you're not confident in your decision. Instead, keep it simple and clear. You don't need to justify why you need something. It's enough to state it calmly. For instance, if you need to leave a gathering early, just say, "I need to go now, but I had a great time. Thanks for having me." No need to add, "I'm so sorry, but I have to leave early, and I feel bad about it." Keep it concise and confident. Over-apologizing not only diminishes your request, but it can also signal to the other person that you feel inferior. A clear, confident statement shows respect for both your needs and theirs, without the guilt trap of over-explaining. Standing up for yourself doesn't have to be a battle. With the right mindset and the right tools, you can assert your boundaries without guilt. Recognize your self-worth, practice saying no, reframe your guilt, use I statements, and avoid over-apologizing. Every time you practice these steps, you'll become more comfortable with asserting yourself, and over time, the guilt will fade. You're allowed to take up space, express your needs, and set boundaries. And doing so will not only make your relationships healthier, but will also empower you to live with confidence. So, the next time you need to stand up for yourself, remember, you've got this, and there's no guilt in taking care of yourself.